Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it today. We are thinking about a junkie to a judge, and that's a real thinker, because that's not something that you pair and you tie together. So that's the opposite. So, luckily for me, I have a guest who has gone through this journey personally and who wants to share it with the world so that if you are going through an addiction and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, let's be honest, there is one. We just got to look a little harder. So Mary is here to explain her little life story. So thank you so much, Mary, for joining me and being on my show.
Sure, and I am from New Jersey, so it's actually Mary Beth, but I know that
Oh,
other parts of the
sorry.
country often don't get that, so no problem at all. Yeah, so I call my memoir From Junkie to Judge One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction because my story is really about both, and that is really common with people who have a substance use disorder. So I was an abused child. My mother wasn't bonded to me. My stepfather was really violent with her, with me, physically, sexually, and it just sort of, it made drugs appealing. And so,
Yeah.
I picked up my first drug at 12, which was alcohol. It was Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine, which a lot of people know. But by 17, I was shooting meth and I was in
Wow.
full bore addiction in high school. And I really didn't get sober till 32. So it was a long haul.
Wow, that does sound like a long while. But quick question though, what did you encounter in your life that made you realize like this has to end? Something has to change in my life before I'm dead or something. Like what was that reality check?
I mean, for me, it was a combination of things. And I think that's true for most people. There's this sort of fantasy in the movies. It's like this, epiphany in the moment, but usually it's a buildup of things. And so for me, I was 32. I was having physical problems, like, the toxicity of the drug was starting to show up. I had worked my way down the corporate ladder, is the way I phrase it. I couldn't hold a job. I was really just, exhausted and in despair. And my partner was ready to throw me out. And so it was all of those things together that made me finally say, well, what if I go to rehab? And
Yeah.
so that's how my recovery started, was because of all those things really in combination.
No, that makes sense because in reality you get the notation little by little. It's just once you finally have that moment to piece it all together, it's like, oh, this is the epiphany. And it's not just one big moment, a cloud passes by,
Yes.
says, change your life. Yeah, that doesn't really happen like that. So it's nice that you were just honest and be like, yeah, I just put it all together. So that makes sense. But what made you want to go into law? I read that you went into Berkeley and you made like such a successful time there. But what made you desire to go into law? You were like, I need to prove that I can do this, or what was it for you?
Well, I mean, when I was young, I was actually really verbal and argumentative, and everyone always told me I would make a good lawyer. And so, I actually went to law school right out of college, but I had really started using meth again heavily in my senior year of college. I had been a little better for the first 3 years of my college career, and so by the time I got to law school in the fall, after really picking meth up heavily again in January, I couldn't do it. I was like in no shape, and I couldn't get to class and I had to withdraw. And so this was like an agonizing loss. I had Berkeley Law School in my hands and I had to give it back because of my drug
Yeah.
addiction. And so when I got sober, it was sort of this underlying pain, but I was in no shape in the beginning to, sort of leap into a professional job. I had to work my way up, to even being able to hold a full-time job. It took me a
Yeah.
while. I didn't have any practice of going to work every day on
Yeah.
time and staying all
Yeah.
day and doing a good job. I needed to get sort of my feet underneath me. And so I, had a couple different jobs over 6 years. And then I applied to law school when I had 6 years sober. And so it was really like I was going back to my original dream. It was going back to what I had wanted initially in the beginning.
I love that. I love how you were just completely honest and you were made it very realistic for yourself. So it wasn't as if it was a big leap. You set little goals and it became little accomplishments and it became realistic to get to that point in your life again. And I think that's beautiful because people need to be reminded that you can do it, but just focus on the little goals. Focus on what you can handle day by day because that makes a difference later on. It gets the ball rolling, and I love that. I absolutely love that. So once you got into law school, you're going down that journey. Did this haunt you, or did you hold the shame of you getting lost in drugs? And how did you keep that away from other people that you were working with, your coworkers or your other interns? I mean, was that like a big stigma? Because for me, I would feel like that would be a hard thing to share when in a field that is so judgmental to people with that type of past. So, what was it for you?
I mean, there definitely is a lot of stigma around substance use disorder. I mean, mental health disorders in general are stigmatized, but addiction is really the most stigmatized. And the truth is that attorneys actually have double the rate of addiction in as to all different drugs, alcohol, opiates, stimulants. I mean, the rates in the legal field are much higher than in the general population. But for me, by the time I was working as a lawyer, I had almost 10 years sober. And so it wasn't like I wasn't really feeling shame about it, or it was more
Okay.
that you don't know how people are going to react. And so once you say it, if you let it out of the bag, you can't put it back in the bag later. Right. And so
Exactly.
part of the reason I talk now is because I know a lot of people can't take that professional risk. And, I'm retired. I always emphasize early retirement. So I can sort of speak in place of people who have valid fears of professional consequences. And so it is part of it is to destigmatize, like you said, to really own it. I mean, for me to own that I shot meth, I mean, it wasn't, addicted to alcohol, which is a harsh drug, but people are a
Yes.
little more sympathetic, right, than they are
Okay.
to somebody who shot meth. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I just want to open the conversation about, it can be anybody who this happens to, but it's often pain underneath the trauma, abuse are often at the core of it. And so I like, to sort of educate about those kind of things.
Yeah, because people need to realize that the reason why you can get addicted to absolutely anything, not just drugs, not just sex, not just the common things that people hear of, anything can be addicted as long as it becomes a habit, and then it becomes a feeling of a need, and then it just becomes continuous and over again. And people don't realize it can truly consume your life if you allow it to take over your life. And if you don't resolve with the trauma, and you truly convince yourself that it's numbing you, because that's what you usually hear, is that I take drugs because it numbs the pain and I don't want to face reality. What is your opinions on that on that when people say that?
I mean, I think it's true. So that if you have a trauma history as a child, your odds of developing an addiction are like 3 to 6 times higher than they would otherwise be. But tied to that is that a high percentage of people, when they get sober, they have mental health. I had PTSD and I didn't even know it. I had severe anxiety. It took me longer to get my PTSD and anxiety under control than it took me to get my substance recovery under control, because it's more
Wow.
complicated and it's
Yeah.
older. And so it is true that many of us have to deal with both when we get sober. Our recovery has to be from both if we really want to be sort of our true self, our whole self, and live our best life.
That's true. That's very true. It's nice that, when you're able to put in that perspective, people can think about their own trauma in a different way, as well as their own habits and their own addictions, because I feel like you give people a type of hope. Like if Mary Beth did it, then I can do it too. I mean, come on, you were a judge. But I guess when you were a judge, I don't know what type of law. I forgot to write it down. So my apologies for not knowing. But when you were a judge and you faced, I don't know if you faced anyone that had addiction or drug convictions. I mean, how did you see them? Did you see them with sympathy, or did you see them with like, oh, if I could do it, you can do it, and there's no excuses? Like you want one of those arrogant attitudes. I mean, for you, what was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do criminal cases, but I did see people that had substance use disorders, but also usually trauma histories with it. And so I absolutely did. I understand. I understand not only what can push you into it, but also how hard it can be to get out of it. And so, anyone who's stuck in that, has my sympathy. And part of what I do want to, part of the reason I do talk is to be that beacon of hope. I mean, I suffered physical and sexual abuse as a child. I had 2 multi-assailant rapes. I lived with a violent boyfriend. I was a drug addict basically for 20 years. And I now have 29 years of sobriety. And I've gotten my PTSD mostly, I say 92 to 95% improved. I'm in a healthy marriage. I'm a good employee when I'm working. I'm a good sibling and friend. And all of that is from having done the work to heal. And it is hard in the beginning, but part of what I always like to let newcomers know is the beginning is the hardest part. It gets easier with time. And so if you can find your way, stick to it for the first 2 years, you'll find that it gets easier and easier at that point.
That's good. That's awesome. I love that. I feel like this conversation was very needed. I hope that it actually helps somebody who may be facing this type of trauma that they feel like they can't get over because maybe they've handled the sobriety, but the trauma's still there. That could be exactly where you are at, where you feel stuck, and just hearing that experience from somebody else, that does give a certain light, to their lives. So I appreciate that. But what made you put it in a book? You know what I mean? You could have continued to share at conventions or just help the people that you had access to as a judge and as you're in your law firm. But what made you want to write a book and really get this out to the world? Because once you write a book, it's to the world.
It is. And I will say part of it was that when I was appointed a judge, it was sort of like a time of reflection. You're like, how the heck did I do this? But I started reading memoir and I thought, what I didn't see was a lot of memoirs sort of leap into the chaos of the addiction. They don't really show where it came from. And so in my memoir, I really do show what led up to it and why it made sense to me at the time to pursue drugs like I did. And then 30% of my memoir is about recovery, and it's about the trauma recovery and the drug recovery. And I did it on an individual plan. I didn't do it the AA way, the 12-step way. And so I wanted to show sort of like how I thought about it, the analysis, and what recovery really looks like, because it's really the first 3 years that I cover, and those are the critical years to build the foundation, to build a strong foundation that'll see you through. So I just thought I wasn't seeing what I wanted to write, and so that was really what pushed me to do it.
That's good. That's very good because that's interesting because not like you said, when people write about addictions, they pick a section and then they focus on that, but you literally laid it out so that people can fully understand where your thought process was from the beginning to the end, because in reality, that's what readers want to know. They want to know where are you coming from? Where did it lead you to this or to that? And how are you? And that is a nice thing because, like I said earlier, it really does give people hope that there's possibility for change. And in reality, there is. I mean, you can change. You just have to really want it, and go after it and make that first step every single day that it's going to do it. And even if you miss a day, at least you know that you're going forward and you're trying. Because were there days for you that was just harder to just do anything? You were like, Mary Beth, we are not doing anything today.
Well, the other reality is that most people don't have like perfect abstinence from day one, right? Like I used 3 times in my first 5 months, but that was a lot better. And so, but you're right. I mean, it's a process and it's not a perfect process. None of us are going to be perfect in our recovery. None of us are going to, behave the way we want every day. And part of it's really just learning. Like I had terrible interpersonal skills. I would verbally aggressive. If I felt like threatened or criticized, I would attack. It takes a while to unlearn those habits and to build better behaviors. And it took me a while for me to really be able to focus on more positive things. Like my natural inclination was always, what don't I have? What have I lost? What were my mistakes? And one of the techniques in recovery I found helpful was to sort of pause every once in a while and look at my progress, because I wasn't going to notice it otherwise. And it's important to see the progress and congratulate ourselves on our hard work and our less than perfect, but, overall moving in the right direction of progress. And so it was things like that.
Perfect, perfect, awesome. This has been really a great conversation. I really believe it. Like, this is such a good time speaking to you. It's like speaking to an old friend or something. Like, it was so easy to just speak to you. This is awesome. So, I guess to fully start wrapping up the show, what would be some great advice that you can leave my audience with? Even though you already gave us so much great things to really think about, what can be some lasting words that can really make us think about this in a different way?
I mean, I agree with what I really like what you said about the incremental progress. It's one of the things I talk about. I think in early recovery, sometimes we want to, we want to think, what's the 5-year plan or even the 2-year plan? But the truth is, in early recovery, you don't know who you're going to be in a year or 2 years because you're going to change so much in that process. So I think what's really important is what's my first plan? What are my priorities and what's my first goal in each of those priority areas? And then what's my plan to reach the goal? And then once you do that, what's the next right goal and the next plan? And just incremental progress, as you said in the beginning, that builds up faster than you would think. It's amazing how far you can go focusing on the right next step for 2 years. It's really amazing. And so, especially in the early days, I really encourage people to focus sort of in that more immediate sense and not worry about 2 years from now or 5 years from now.
Right? Because it's going to come eventually. So, might as well just focus on the now because, man, when you think about the future, it can really make you freeze and get anxiety and then get
Yes.
overwhelmed. And then God forbid you start comparing yourself with other people. And it's like, like, no, put the brakes on, relax, focus on you, and just take it easy. Yes, I love it. I love that response. That's awesome. And if anybody in my audience would like to purchase the book or would like to know more about Mary Beth, please, you can find her on my website. That goes directly to her website. Just click under her lovely photo and boom, check it out. She has a lot of great content that will truly make you think about, life and addiction and trauma in just a different way that's necessary right now because as a humanity is evolving, we are also still hurting. We're hurting a lot, and it's time for us to come back to ourselves and start to see what's we've been pushing on other people, to really be able to be better and show better for the next generation. Because I'm pretty sure this is the reason why Mary Beth is speaking out, because she wants the next generation to do better, live better, and strive for better, So thank you, Mary Beth, for doing this and sharing and going out to different conferences and having a busy, busy, busy schedule like a little bee. Thank you, thank you, thank you for also being on my show. You have truly been so awesome. So there you go, you guys. That's it. That's the show. Always, always, always be thinking, y'all. Bye.